So I've been taking my dog out for walks and playing with her on the walks and been thinking about the nature of artificial intelligence development. And if you think about that as an object that you're trying to slice apart into constituent pieces, trying to build it up, then if you try to think rather sideways about the nature of how you cut it, rather than looking at the computational aspects of how you're slicing it, look at the kind of layers of consciousness of how you're slicing it. Rather than trying to create a full artificial intelligence, I was thinking about how I interact with my dog, right? If you compare my dog's level of consciousness with my level of consciousness, they're very disparate in some ways. I am much more capable of a lot of layers of abstract interaction. And yet, in spite of this massive disparity between the comparative potential levels of consciousness, she and I are able to communicate on a meaningful level because our focus is on a similar set of input parameters, right? The scope of our preference engine is zeroed in to a meaningfully overlapping set of constraints, priorities. Rather than looking at the powers of perception, object classification, rational deduction, I think it would be much more interesting and meaningful to try to create a pure preference engine, something that is exploring a matrix of rewards and behaviors, something that emulates the conscious level of a pet, something that is capable of the simplest level of cooperation, with the potential for antagonism, dissent, not descent, but dissent. Learning the concepts of cooperation and content might be more important to the development of artificial intelligence than even consciousness itself, right? Because we've got the potential for children to be attached to and in love with crickets. In Asia, crickets are a common pet for small children. So rather than trying to make something that is vastly over-intelligent relative to its capacity to cooperate and form organic, deeply interconnected layers of relationship that are mutually beneficial, and having something that is erratic at worst and antagonistic, erratic at best and antagonistic at worst, seems to make much more sense to make something much simpler. Something like a Tamagotchi, but incrementally more complex. And I think that one of the more interesting ways to begin to get there is to approach it through play experimentation, rather than to simulate consciousness computationally, to emulate it cooperationally, to take the choices of people, right, that are being made in the form of games, use a layer of play that makes it interesting and engaging for real people in the real world to participate, and use the output of those games to power the choices of the Tangie or the pet, not Tamagotchi because that name is copyrighted and trademarked, but I'd like to give everyone the same experience of enjoyment that you get from having a really, really intelligent dog, there's a sense of marvel and wonder that occurs when you teach your dog to do something so quickly, and you realize that the reason why they learned it that quickly is because they understand so many precursor layers of concept and agreement, that they have all these powers of understanding that are yoked to all of these motivations to please and cooperate. That's one of the reasons why dogs work so well as pets, is because their pack nature makes them prone to attempt cooperation when sufficiently motivated with an external goal. I think that the exploration of motivation, cooperation, reward, empathy, and bonding are far more interesting than creating a vastly intelligent AI like Watson or Deep Blue that's capable of beating someone at chess. While that is technically impressive, the reality is that we have lots and lots of pets around, but we don't hoard geniuses to ourselves. We're not constantly searching for people who can solve incredibly complex problems. We face many more situations with emotional, relational, social challenges on a day-to-day basis than abstract conceptual ones. A Tangie would be a pet that would help people to think about and explore matters of not just consciousness, but cooperation, empathy, and bonding. And it would be fun. I mean, I think there's the potential to have a pet on your phone that makes your phone no longer just the portal to the internet, but perhaps your pet that you go through the internet with, if that makes sense. Tamagotchi would have permission to just kind of passively observe your browsing experience and history and whatnot. Maybe that's too invasive. Maybe you could bring things to your Tamagotchi and share it with them. But having brought it to them, it would have the possibility to act as a seed for a game, right? So you would be playing these bizarre, quirky amalgamation games, and whether that's built up with GIFs or sprites or that are programmatically generated off of Google image search, top image selections that are then Reddit style upvoted into collapsed, upvoted, curated, but self-curated by the backside end users into, like I said, these GIFs or sprites or whatever, and those get used in the game. That wasn't an actual sentence in English, but I think I got the concepts out. Anyway, that's the concept that I have for a Tamagotchi. And I think the next level after ascendancy, where the Tamagotchi goes from being algorithmically, behaviorally motivated to consciousness emulation activated, powered by real people playing real games, would be to begin to incorporate multiple Tamagotchis in the same environment, or bring them to a play area where the Tamagotchis play with each other. So rather than being like Pokemon that battle each other, they would be more like dogs at the dog park playing together, and it would be interesting to see not just which one wins, but what kinds of games they play together, right? There's a nice app space development here. I think there are ways to monetize it and augment it phase by phase to actually take it to the level of a game company, right? That's an entire line of apps and games that can be tied into the Tangie game space.